Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to heal your nervous system, the more your body seems to tense, flare, or shut down? You add more tools. You focus more on your symptoms. You push harder to calm down. And instead of feeling better, you end up feeling more on edge. This confusion is one of the most frustrating parts of chronic symptoms. Many people assume it means that they're not doing enough or doing something wrong. But in reality, the nervous system is simply responding to tone, not intention. So, in this episode, we're going to explore the exact moment when healing turns into pressure, why your body reacts the way it does, and what actually helps your system feel safe again. Welcome to the Building Resilience Podcast, episode 257, when healing becomes a job your nervous system hates. Welcome to Building Resilience, a podcast where theory, practical strategies, and inspiring stories show you how to unlock your best life. I'm your host, Leah Davidson. As a certified life coach, speech-language pathologist, and nervous system resilience expert, it is my mission to teach you how to be more resilient to life's adversities. I will show you how to manage your mind, befriend your nervous system, process your emotions, and even eliminate stress. It's time to do more than just survive. It's time to thrive. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Now, I want to ask you, are you joining us in the Nervous System Journaling Club? This month, we have a whole month focused on play, and it's not too late to join. Your nervous system needs play. And if the word play doesn't resonate with you, or you're not sure what I even mean by play, then I want to invite you to think of other words. Fun, magic, curiosity, excitement, lightness. This is what your nervous system actually needs, especially as we dive into today's topic. Now, if you are struggling with challenges in your life, and maybe you know your nervous system is dysregulated, or maybe you have no clue if it is, but you see that you're struggling with exhaustion or pain or chronic symptoms, maybe in your gut or autoimmune symptoms, or maybe you have a lot of anxiety, or you're just feeling constantly on edge or overworked or burnt out. Or maybe it's the opposite. You're numb and shut down and depressed. Now, these are all messages from your nervous system. And you may think then that the solution is to just work harder to try to get to the bottom of all these symptoms. So you may go see one more doctor or one more therapist or try one more protocol or cut out one more food group or get even more disciplined. But spoiler alert, these approaches usually backfire because the nervous system does not respond to pressure. It responds to a relationship. And this is where many people fall into a trap. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because their nervous system is brilliantly designed to protect them. Now, when symptoms show up in all shapes and forms, the brain interprets them as threat cues. So then, of course, you act accordingly. But sometimes those very reactions become the fuel for even more symptoms, and you end up digging yourself even deeper. Now, I interviewed Dr. Howard Schubiner on the podcast back in the spring. I am a huge fan of his work. He's a leading expert in the area of chronic pain and symptoms of all things mind-body syndrome. And I've done trainings with him, and I've integrated a lot of what he teaches into my own practice, both as a speech pathologist and as a coach. He actually outlined 6 survival reactions that keep pain and symptoms stuck that he calls the 6 Fs. Now, I actually added a 7th F because I see it constantly in my world. These Fs show up especially in chronic symptoms, chronic pain, and stress-based conditions. And the tricky part about them, they don't actually seem harmful. They actually feel like you're being responsible. They feel proactive. They feel like you are trying. But to the nervous system, they often communicate danger. So today we're going to walk through these Fs together. And I invite you to notice which ones resonate with you. Maybe all of them do, maybe a couple of them do. It's totally normal. We are not judging. We're simply building awareness and simply observing. And then next week, we're going to take a closer look at what we can do instead. So make sure you tune in next week as well. So the first F is fear. Fear is usually the first domino that falls, and we could do an entire episode on fear alone, and honestly, we probably will in the future because it's at the core of so many of our symptoms. Now, when pain or symptoms flare up, Your brain isn't evaluating them calmly. It isn't saying, interesting, what an unusual sensation. What it is it's scanning for a threat, and that's its job. The amygdala, the part of the brain that deals with danger, it reacts quickly and automatically. It's not trying to be dramatic, it's just trying to keep you alive. So when a sensation shows up, especially one that feels unpredictable or unfamiliar, the brain will often jump to the worst case scenario. So you might notice that immediate knot in your stomach or the tension in your jaw or a quick shift in your breathing. These changes, they really aren't random. They're part of the nervous system's response, essentially saying it's better to be safe than sorry. Now, fear also changes the way you perceive sensations. And this is where something that's called the pain fear cycle comes in. I've talked about it before in the podcast, but we'll talk about it again because it's really important to understand. So the cycle goes like this. You feel a sensation, you worry about it or kind of fear it because you don't want it. And then that worry or that fear creates even more tension or stress in your body and probably more pain. And then, of course, that tension makes the sensations even more uncomfortable, which makes you even more worried and more fearful, and around you go. So it's not that the sensation is dangerous. It's that your nervous system is interpreting your fear as proof that something is wrong. So it turns up the volume. Now, what happens is fear teaches your nervous system to pay closer attention to the sensation. And the brain takes it very literally. If we're afraid of this, we better turn up the sensitivity so we can monitor it even more closely. And then this is where the pain pathways become reinforced. The brain starts predicting pain instead of just responding to it. It's trying to protect you by warning you earlier and earlier and louder and louder. Now, this is one reason why two people can have the exact same physical issue, but only one develops chronic symptoms. It's not about toughness or weakness. It's about how the nervous system interprets threat, and then the messages and the pathways get established that way. So when fear shows up, you'll often notice your body shift. Maybe your muscles tend to guard the area more. Your breath becomes more shallow. Your posture tightens. Your attention narrows to the sensation. And those shifts then change the blood flow, the muscle tone, and even the sensitivity of the nerves, which actually increases discomfort. Now, let's be clear. None of this means you're imagining the symptoms or the pain. But it does mean that your nervous system is participating. Now, once fear is on board, another part of the brain comes online, the one that loves to solve things. And you start thinking, what is this? Why is this happening? How do I make it stop? What if it never goes away? And you're not choosing these thoughts. Your nervous system is driving them as part of its safety strategy. So fear says, we're not okay. And your brain responds with, don't worry, I'll figure it out. So the problem is that fear plus attention creates more activation, not less. And that's the pain fear cycle again. Sensation, fear, tension, more sensation, more fear. And it's not because anything structurally has worsened, but because the nervous system is doing its job a little bit too well. Now, once fear is running the show, the brain becomes determined to solve the mystery. So after fear, the next F comes focus. This is where your attention starts to narrow around the sensation. And it's really subtle at first. You might notice it for a moment and then go about your day. But very quickly, your nervous system can assign it a priority status. And hypervigilance shows up in small ways. Like you wake up and you check before you get out of bed. What am I feeling? What am I sensing? You pause throughout the day to see if the symptom or the pain is still there. You'll scan your body during stressful moments and checking in to see what's still going on. And mentally, you'll be tracking intensity and location and timing. Now, again, none of this means that you're doing anything wrong. It means that your nervous system is trying to gather all the data. When something feels potentially dangerous, the brain believes that constantly monitoring will keep you safe. So it's the same mechanism that makes you keep an eye on a stove burner or glance at a suspicious noise in the middle of the night. But the nervous system doesn't distinguish between danger out there and sensations in here. So then monitoring itself becomes a signal. And attention is never neutral. It's fuel. From a brain standpoint, attention teaches importance. If we're paying this much attention to something, it must matter. So then the brain, of course, prioritizes those sensory pathways. It increases the sensitivity of nerve receptors and it reduces your ability to filter out the noise and it sends more resources there. And that is why symptoms will often feel louder when you're just checking on them. Dr. Schubiner talks about this in the context of predictive coding. When the brain expects a sensation, it often creates one or it amplifies one because it would rather the sensation come early than be wrong. So if you've had discomfort in your shoulder, for example, your brain will continue to monitor that area as if it's protecting damaged tissue, even long after the tissue is fine. And this is why tracking pain in detailed journals, hour by hour, location, intensity, often backfires. So, I am a huge advocate for journaling for some things, but tracking your symptoms like that is not one of them. Because from the nervous system's perspective, all you are doing is documenting danger. And that teaches your brain, keep this on your radar now. And again, this is not some type of psychological weakness. It actually is just basic neuroplasticity. Remember, neurons that fire together are wired together. So the more time your attention spends on the sensation, the more your brain invests in that pathway. Now, there's also something called perceptual sharpening. When the brain thinks you need to monitor a threat, it sharpens your ability to detect even the smallest changes. That's why you can notice tiny fluctuations that you probably never would have cared about before. Your brain is simply trying to protect you from being surprised. Now, over time, this hyper focus creates almost like a tunnel vision as you stop noticing the neutral sensations or the positive sensations or even entire parts of your body because all your attention funnels towards the one area that your brain has tagged as important. And then your world kind of shrinks, your attention kind of shrinks, your options feel like they're shrinking. And the nervous system continues to read urgency. Eventually, this constant monitoring, it wears on your whole system. There is a cost to watching something you don't want to feel. That cost will often show up as irritation or resentment or discouragement or exhaustion, which brings us to the next phase of the cycle. When you have been focusing on discomfort for so long, frustration is right around the corner. And it's not coming from out of nowhere. It's a natural emotional outcome of monitoring a threat that never seems to resolve. Frustration is the next F, and it's usually the emotional phase that follows prolonged fear and focus. It really is almost like this anger mixed with grief. And these two emotions, most of us were never taught how to hold well or how to process. So it can sound something like, I used to be able to do more. Why is this happening now? I'm doing everything right and nothing is changing. This isn't fair. I just want my life back. There is a real loss underneath those statements. There's a loss of ease, a loss of movement, a loss of predictability, and often even a loss of identity. Nobody tells you that chronic symptoms come with grief, but they do. And because grief can feel overwhelming, frustration becomes more familiar and it surfaces. It's active. It gives us somewhere to put that energy that we have. But again, frustration changes your internal tone. And this is often where people can end up turning on themselves. And you'll hear your inner critic saying things like, come on, you should be better than this. You're being dramatic, just push through. It's like talking to your nervous system the way a disappointed parent would talk to a kid who isn't performing well. Well, the nervous system doesn't understand the words, but it understands the tone. And that tone signals danger. Also, when we're frustrated, our body does a few predictable things. Our muscles again tighten, especially our shoulders, our jaw, our neck, our hands. Our breath shortens and speeds up. Our blood pressure rises, and our face and voice can even shift into a state of agitation. Now, all of those cues again tell the nervous system threat is nearby. And again, it doesn't care whether the threat is a tiger or a thought. Tension is tension. And then that tension changes how the symptoms are processed. The muscles get tighter already around these sensitive areas. The blood flow shifts away from digestion and repair. The brain increases its monitoring effort, and nerve pathways become even more sensitive. So the thing we don't want increases. And this is also where fear shifts from this hurts into I'm losing control. And when the brain senses a loss of control, it becomes even more vigilant. And that's often when the story changes and we start saying things like, I can't keep living like this, I'm falling behind. And those thoughts aren't irrational. They're very predictable when the nervous system has been stuck in activation for a while. And then something subtle to know, frustration rarely stays in the body as pure frustration. It often kind of leaks sideways into like irritability and impatience and self-criticism or even resentment towards people who just don't get it. And it's not because you're being unkind. It's because you're tired. You're tired of monitoring. You're tired of explaining. You're tired of trying to be okay. And at this stage, people tend to fall into this all or nothing thinking. If this doesn't improve soon, I'm done. Or if one more thing goes wrong today, I just can't handle it. And when we're frustrated, our capacity, our zone of resilience is smaller. We react faster. We are in more of a team hyper state. And when frustration has been running the show for long enough, many of us do the same thing. We try to double down. We try harder. We push more. We force calm. We treat the body like it's a problem to solve quickly, which pulls us straight into the next cycle, the fight response. Because when frustration builds past a certain point, we go to war with ourselves. That can feel like the only option. So once frustration has been simmering long enough, we move into a deeper state of team hyper, into fight, which is the next F. Now, fight on the surface, it can look productive. It can sound like, I'm not going to let this win. I'm going to push through. I can override this. Or I don't have time for this. And often in today's culture, we're praised for this kind of mindset. We celebrate grit and hustle and pushing past limits. So it makes sense that we apply the same strategies to symptoms. Now, fighting can also feel like we're taking back control. And this reaction is built into us. It's that sympathetic fight branch in that team hyper, that sympathetic state. When something threatens you, your body mobilizes. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, blood flows to your limbs. It's great if you're sprinting away from danger or defending yourself physically. But the problem is you are not fighting a tiger. You're fighting your own internal experience. Now, that internal struggle may sound like relax, calm down, stop it, go away. But underneath the words, there's this tone of urgency. Anger plus urgency equals even more sympathetic activation. So fighting says to your nervous system, we are not safe. We need more adrenaline. Keep the alarm on. So your system does exactly what it's designed to do. It just keeps ramping up. So even when you think you're fighting for your healing, your nervous system still hears we're in danger. And because the nervous system doesn't speak language, it doesn't care that you're trying to calm yourself. It is reading all those body signals, your increased heart rate, your clenched jaw, your pressured tone, the bracing of your posture. These are all danger cues. And then this is where you see people trying to force regulation. I'll do breath work even harder. I'll stretch more aggressively. I'll meditate better this time. But pressure is not the same as calm. You cannot force your way into safety. The nervous system doesn't shut off because you commanded it to shut off. Now, think about like comforting a scared child. If you demanded calmness from them, like louder, sharper, more impatient, they probably would get even more scared, not less. They would tense, they would shut down, or they would panic. They'd go into a tantrum. Well, your nervous system responds the same way. When you fight internal sensations, you're sending the message that the sensation itself is dangerous. And that creates that feedback loop. Sensation, fear, fight, more sensation. So we're back to that pain-fear cycle. And because the state mobilizes a lot of energy, then you've got cortisol and adrenaline and glucose. It's exhausting. You can only do a sprint for so long. Eventually, all the fighting time will burn people out. And then this is often where people will notice their sleep gets worse, their digestion changes, they feel wired and tired, and they lose patience quickly. They may wake up already braced because your system cannot stay in high alert without a cost. And when fighting doesn't work, when symptoms don't go away through force or grit, the brain becomes uncomfortable with not knowing. Uncertainty is one of the most activating experiences we have. So the brain will shift strategies. If fighting can't solve the problem, maybe more information will. And that's where the detective phase begins, where we're searching and researching and scanning and Googling and troubleshooting. The goal shifts from defeating the sensation to understanding it completely. It seems like a calmer strategy, but it's often driven by the same fear that's underneath. I'm not safe until this makes sense, which is how fighting quietly evolves into trying to figure things out. The next S, figuring it out. And the cycle continues. This is where the brain, in figuring it out, tries to think its way to safety. So it will look like late night Googling or joining symptom forums or scrolling through Reddit threads or reading every single possible article you can find, creating all these long lists of possible causes, comparing your symptoms to other people's stories. And on the surface, this can feel like you're being responsible because you're gathering information. You're trying to understand what's happening. You're trying to prevent something from being missed. And of course, again, it totally makes sense. The human brain is built for pattern recognition. So we like to map out cause and effect. We like certainty. We like control. But nervous system generated symptoms usually don't have a single simple cause. There usually isn't just one injury or one lab value that explains everything. These symptoms are often the result of neural circuits, patterns in the brain that have been reinforced over a lot of time. So instead of finding a clear explanation, you will end up with conflicting information and all these worst case scenarios and all this endless what ifing and contradictory advice even. And then that uncertainty is even more activating. The moment the brain feels uncertainty, the amygdala steps in and you'll notice your thoughts speed up, your heart rate might change, your breathing shifts. The nervous system again reads uncertainty as a risk. So then figuring it out turns into rumination and looping thoughts that don't actually lead anywhere. Rumination can sound like, what if this means something's more serious? What if I miss something? What if this gets worse? What if I can't work anymore? What if this ruins my relationships? And rumination doesn't resolve fear, it fuels it. So from a neuroscience perspective, the more you engage in these loops, the more efficient your brain becomes at sending anxious signals and looping around because it's trying to help. And it thinks this is problem solving. But the nervous system is actually hearing, we're not safe until we get the perfect explanation. And actually, the brain would rather have a scary answer than no answer at all, because at least a scary answer gives it something to act on. Now, with uncertainty, there's nothing to do except for wait. And waiting is one of the hardest things for an activated nervous system. I'm sure we've all experienced the pain of waiting in uncertainty. So then the brain will push to escalate the search. Let's look for new doctors, new specialists, new tests, new supplements, new protocols. And this can lead to something that is called medical shopping, where you're hopping from practitioner to practitioner, hoping that someone will say the magic sentence that finally makes your nervous system relax. And when the search doesn't produce certainty, the nervous system will tighten even more. Your body can go into even more of a protective mode, more bracing, more tension, more scanning, more fatigue. And then these symptoms of activation get interpreted as symptoms of threat, which keeps the cycle going. So the ironic part is that the act of searching becomes a safety behavior. I'm saying that in quotes. It's something you do to feel less afraid. But these safety behaviors actually often reinforce the idea that there's something to fear. And over time, figuring it out takes up a large amount of mental space. You can find yourself thinking about symptoms when you're out for a walk or during conversations, even while you're trying to fall asleep. Your world shrinks to try to manage and monitor the symptoms. Now, none of this is happening because you're obsessive or dramatic. It's happening because your nervous system is trying to control the uncontrollable. And eventually, when information doesn't quiet that alarm, most people will shift strategies again. And they'll move from figuring it out to fixing it, which is the next F. The tone changes from what is this to how do I get rid of it? And this is the next phase. Fixing is usually the next most logical step when figuring out doesn't bring relief. This is where the nervous system shifts from analysis into action, and the goal becomes make this stop. So you start adding things, more supplements, new devices and gadgets, another physical therapy exercise, a different posture correction, another specialist visit, or maybe it's more stretching or biohacks that you saw on social media. Again, none of these are inherently wrong. Many of them can actually be very supportive, but it's the intention behind them that matters. If you're choosing them from curiosity and support or self-care, the nervous system can tolerate them well. But most people don't choose them from curiosity. They choose them from fear and desperation. The internal tone can sound something like, I have to fix this before it gets worse, or I'm running out of time, or if this doesn't work, nothing's going to work, or my body isn't doing its job. When that tone is underneath your efforts, the nervous system interprets it as a confirmation that something is wrong. Even if you're using all the regulation tools, the pressure behind them becomes the louder signal. So there's a difference between I'm trying this because it feels supportive and I'm trying this because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't. The nervous system hears the difference. When fixing becomes constant, it can really turn healing into a full-time job. Every moment then becomes like an assessment, and your identity can start to narrow around symptom management. And here's the biological problem. Effort equals mobilization. Mobilization equals sympathetic activation. Sympathetic activation tells the body we're not safe yet. So even while you're trying to calm yourself, your physiology is bracing. And this is where you see you're working hard to relax your system, but the intensity of your effort tells your system, stay alert, we're not okay. And then you might start stacking different protocols, morning routines, evening routines, hydration, breathing timers, stretching every 2 hours. Again, these are all fine in isolation, but if they're being driven by fear, then you spend your entire day in this almost subtle state of vigilance, watching your symptoms like a hawk. And then every new tool you could add reinforces the belief, I can't do this on my own. And then that can quietly erode trust in your body's ability to rest and get to a safe state, that relaxation response. Now, over time, fixing can become compulsive. You may have noticed that you have increased tension while doing a relaxation practice, or you have guilt if you miss a routine, or you panic when the results don't show up quick enough, or you're constantly trying without moments of simply being. So there's truly no rest in that model. And remember, the nervous system, it heals and rests. Now, fixing can also create another trap of comparing. You might notice yourself watching what helps other people or trying to match their routines or adding more and more strategies to keep up. Now, that comparison adds another layer of stress. Eventually, fixing can start to feel like you're chasing your old self, the version of you who used to be able to do more or feel less or move more easily. You might find yourself bargaining even with your body. Oh, if I do all of this perfectly, maybe I'll get that version back. Now, that longing, it's really grief, kind of dressed up as productivity. So when all the fixing, all the effort, all the protocols don't deliver the past that you once had, many people will find themselves in kind of a heartbreaking place. The belief that nothing will work, that you're stuck, that this is your new life. Which brings us to the final F that I have added to Dr. Schuberter's list of F's, forlorn. Now, forlorn is kind of the quiet and the heavy stage of the cycle. It's the part where you start comparing who you now are to who you used to be. Now, you might remember a version of yourself who could move without thinking and wake up without scanning your body and socialize without planning all the recovery time or simply living without tracking symptoms. That comparison, it's not just being nostalgic, it's actually grief. It is the loss of ease and capacity and identity. Many of us identify grief with death, but of course, grief shows up in many other areas. And it can show up when your life doesn't look the way you expected it to look, when your body feels unpredictable, when routines shrink, when you start planning around discomfort. And because grief is uncomfortable, many people want to skip over it. Instead of it giving space, they jump straight into stories like, I'll never get better. This is just who I am now. I'm falling behind. Other people get to heal. I don't. So hopelessness can become your survival response. Now, when effort hasn't worked and fixing hasn't worked, the nervous system conserves energy. It can move into more of a shutdown mode, a team hypo state. And remember, this isn't a laziness, it's a physiological conservation strategy. Now, in shutdown, you'll often notice low motivation, emotional numbness, even disinterest in activities you used to enjoy, or social withdrawal, or a lack of appetite, or digestive changes, trouble initiating tasks. These all can be symptoms. Your nervous system is basically saying, slow everything down. We cannot keep sprinting. So the state can almost feel quiet, but there's a heaviness. Maybe it can be flat or blank or numb because you're not fighting anymore. You're not figuring things out anymore. You're not fixing. You're just kind of enduring. And healing becomes a lot harder from this place because the body isn't mobilizing energy for repair. So digestion slows, immunity can weaken, and inflammation can rise. Now, that doesn't mean that you're stuck there permanently, but it means that your nervous system needs a different approach. Now, one of the most painful parts of the forlorn is the identity piece, because you start to wonder, who am I without the energy I used to have? Am I reliable? Am I capable? Am I fun? Will people think that I'm just difficult? And these questions, really, they're not dramatic. They're just very human. When your capacity changes, identity shifts with it. And then we have this identity grief. So in this phase, thinking about the future really feels heavy. The nervous system can't imagine things being different because it hasn't experienced different recently. So it predicts more of the same. Remember, prediction is the brain's default mode. And if the brain predicts struggle, it prepares for struggle. And that preparation is going to look again like a guarded posture and increased monitoring, bracing, pulling back from stimulus. All of these behaviors reinforce to the nervous system, we're still not safe. So the cycle continues. See the endless cycle we can be in. It's important to say clearly here, though. If you see yourself in multiple Fs, it doesn't mean that you're failing. It means your nervous system is doing its job. These are protective strategies. They are designed to keep you alive, but not comfortable. And when symptoms are neural, meaning they come from the nervous system itself, these protective responses can accidentally reinforce the alarm. And the brain listens for danger cues. So it's listening for the urgency, the tension, the frustration, the fear in your voice, the pressure in your tone. And logic doesn't regulate the nervous system. Safety cues do. And so forlorn is often the point in the journey where people stop trying to fight their nervous system and start learning how to befriend it. Not with pressure or intensity, but with warmth and presence and consistency. Because the nervous system doesn't heal from force. It heals from invitation and experience. All right. That, I know, was a lot of information. We are going to hit pause here. Now, again, just to reinforce, if you heard yourself in one or all of these Fs, all of these responses, that's not evidence of failure. It's evidence of protection. Your nervous system has been doing its job in the only way that it knows how. Now, next week in part 2, we're going to talk about what actually helps, not by pushing harder, not by performing calm, but by building a new relationship with your nervous system. So take a breath, maybe let your shoulders drop, and I'll see you next week. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Building Resilience podcast. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about managing stress, building resilience, and leading a more purposeful life, then make sure we're connected on Instagram and Facebook at Leah Davidson Life Coaching. You can also subscribe to my weekly newsletter at www.leahdavidsonlifecoaching.com/newsletter. Looking forward to connecting.